Hey buddies, welcome to my very first episode of Learning to Be Your Own Pharmacist, wild foraging and utilizing various plants in your neighborhood to basically make it so you don't need to go to a Walgreens ever again. And it's clean, it's natural, it's made in your own kitchen, it has been used for thousands of years by cultures all over the world, it's backed by science, no reason not to just jump in, especially when it's technically free to use. So, this month we were going to talk specifically about analgesics. Analgesics. I'm a 13-year-old boy, I swear. We were going to talk about painkillers, right? Natural painkillers you can find in your backyard. And when we're talking painkillers, we mean topical, internal, so anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial. You can think of stuff specifically when I'm talking like antiviral applying to rheumatic disorders and lupus and chronic fatigue, just really draining systemic mast cell activation, right? It's usually the result of a viral infection. We're seeing a huge amount of that spike with COVID, so long haul COVID is a really good example of that. And that's done, again, topically or internally, so it depends kind of on what you're dealing with. So skin-wise, I would highly, highly, highly recommend either wild tobacco, which you can find anywhere for the most part. It grows all over the Americas. It's been in our history for over 10,000 years, and it's so entwined in our brain chemistry that we have our own channel in our brain, kind of like the endocannabinoid system, for dopamine specifically tied to nicotine. That's why it's so effective as a painkiller, and it can basically act as anything. Same thing as marijuana. So it can be a stimulant, a depressant, it can be a disassociative. So it has a really high functional breadth of activity in our brain when we utilize it. So I made a video on TikTok talking about the fact that shamans, historically, we're talking addiction and drugs, were expected to imbibe these substances daily and or like through ritual and divination, which was their job. 10% of the population, I always talk about the leader genes and psychosis and mental illness, spiritual leaders, tribal leaders, shamans, people that work magic. You can take everybody from Merlin to, Egyptian burial rites, and a lot of their iconography religiously is tied to a lot of different plant things, and splitting people open and stuffing them with plant things, and then wrapping them in plant things, and then burying them to be turned into a paint pigment by white European people. And to be eaten. They ate dead mummies back then. They were no joke. English people back then were just crazy culture. Crazy culture. I mean, I guess it's not any crazier than a lot of the Japanese culture in like the 16 and 1500s. That's really fascinating too. I don't know. Anyway, sidetrack. Tobacco. It grows everywhere. Virginia is where you guys normally think of for like cigarette tobacco and pipe tobacco. It's the big leaf tobacco. The stuff that I have that grows in the desert is small leaf tobacco. It's small little bushy plants. They have beautiful little bells on them, little curvy flower structures, and then they bloom with these beautiful dropping little white flowers. And they're yellow if they're on trees. I don't know if you guys can see this cute little flower on my thing. So I do a lot of different stuff with it. I grind up, stuff that I find that's not really necessarily usable for smokage. And I will infuse it with coconut oil. I will put it through a very, very low temperature extraction. And even a lower temperature extraction, I'll put it through a socklet. And I don't use any kind of in the typical newer solvents, right? So if you think of like isopropyl, ethanol, butane and hydrocarbons and all that stuff, I don't, obviously I'm not a big fan of that. I don't want to pump that through the stuff that I smoke and I eat. When I'm processing the wild tobacco for something that's a consumable product through the lungs, I do a similar process for curing that white people do for their Virginia tobacco. So it's cased, it's topped, it's left to kind of sit in its own juices and ferment a little bit in a jar. And the older it gets and the more it kind of has time to sit and stew, the better and more mellow it gets, and a lot of the base notes of tobacco come out. But I don't dry mine or put it through like a industrial mill to flavor it. Like my one day I'm never gonna stop smoking tobacco. Like, it's in my brain. There's a reason schizophrenics are always associated with chain smoking, especially if you watch like movies in the 70s portraying it. There's dueling theories on it, but I absolutely agree with that because of the whole dopamine receptor thing and its role with why we hallucinate, right? So it's super cool. It staves off the hallucinations. So this is put through a machine. What they do is they hang up the leaves to dry in the roof of a cellar. Sometimes they do it in different ways. It's like flute, or they do it by heat. And then after that, it's loaded to a big machine that cuts it, lays it flat, adds a bunch of chemicals to it that make nicotine way more effective in your body for less quality product. It's really bad for you. And then they spray the stuff that they use to put in vapes on it. Like I'm so into nicotine, I built my own vape collection, like my own e-cig juice. I still have a big thing of nicotine. And all the flavorings for it, which are just basically like food approved flavorings that they put in. And that's a food additive. They use that on tobacco too, specifically WS-32, which was my menthol agent. It's in Juice Head. It's in a lot of them. So I case mine. This, again, doesn't have any of that shit in it. Like, whether vaping is way better than smoking, if we just had the original stuff, it wouldn't have any of it in it. And it would be medication. They used to use this to treat lung disorders and the flu. Like it's an expectorant is what they technically call it medically, but it makes you hack up all the goo in your lungs. And because it's anti-inflammatory, it provides relief from bronchial inflammation, like bronchitis. That's why they thought early on with COVID, it kind of blew my mind. They were like, cigarette smokers have a less chance of catching COVID. And then it came out and said, well, that's not necessarily true. But when I was looking up a lot of the uses for this, if we think about the indigenous area that these people were in for like what they caught, it helps with things like tuberculosis and fungal lung infections. And then it helps with, I think influenza was one of them too. Because influenza's been around. It's been around. Since I think the Europeans, I don't know. I had to look up when influenza came because I want to say that it's way old. Anyway, like smallpox and shit. Let's just go with smallpox, which is a viral thing. So historically speaking, this is one of the best plants for our body. It's the America's version of tobacco, cannabis, which, if I recall correctly, comes from Southeast Asia and then into Iraq, Pakistan, Afghanistan. And there's also a weird Rudalawas strain that comes from Africa. It's a short, squat little bush. It's not very potent, but you can put genes in it through, breeding and genetics to make regular plants grow short and bushy, so you can grow them in containers, right? It's selective breeding. All right, so lots of explanations on tobacco. Number one analgesic with the cunnilingus that I would recommend. Second on the list, we're going to talk about willow bark. So, again, everywhere on the planet, essentially, has its own willow species that are endemic to it. Willow bark is where they get white aspirin from. So, salicylic acid is the chemical in the bark of willow that they basically extract out and then form into aspirin pills. And salicylic acid, when we're talking plants, they use it as a anti-inflammatory and a defense system. So when someone comes along and starts peeling bark off of it, they can put that in the goo that they make. It's their blood, their sap. You can think of, they have circulatory systems like we do. So they send that out and they use it to repair the damage. So it is it is the plant's it is what we're going to use it for. Which is exactly what you can use it for. So again, you can put it in topicals, you can make vinegars out of it. You can make it into tea and take it like an actual painkiller. I like to use everything with salves and topicals. I'm not really big on taking any kind of NSAIDs. And again, salicylic acid is aspirin, which is what you can use in small doses to prevent heart attacks. So, riddle me this. We have all this around us. Historically, we've always used it. And then we find small amounts of it after the Western diet comes in and basically takes all of this knowledge from us so that they can package it and sell it back to you at exorbitant prices and ruin your lives and keep you in crippling debt and fear to live in a system that's soul-crushing so that billionaires can yearn for the tubes. It's a very wise person on TikTok said. These grow everywhere. It's everywhere. And they're very distinct. Like, if you've ever heard of a weeping willow, it's a big tree that's got these very long, drippy, kind of, leafing patterns. We have a very specific plant out here called desert willow, which is not technically a willow species, but it gets that name because it has the same kind of leaf pattern and these beautiful flowers. And this bark is, again, just a keystone species for ethnobotany here. So this is a powerful, powerful antifungal. One of the most powerful antifungals we have in the desert. And you can use it to treat influenza too. So when we're talking antifungals, fun part, I found a couple articles about ladies that I just admire. Like, I wish one day I could be this savage, but she was talking about how good it is to douche with. So if you have a yeast infection, you can put this in a tea, right? And what that means is low extraction, right? So it's a double boiler. I get all fancy because I like to feel like I'm in, science. It's household items. It's like it looks fancy, but it's really not. And I'll show you why it's not. You can use this to work with eczema, psoriasis, ringworm, toenail and fingernail fungal infections. You need to drink it as part of tea in the summer here because we have valley fever. We have a lot of Basidiomycota, I'm going to say. No, it's not Basidiomycota. I forget what it is. We have a ton of stuff that's in the soil. Like, I go out and I trek everywhere all the time, and I get a lot of shit on me that's fungal from being in the soil. And this is true if you garden, too. Find the antifungals in your area that, have traditionally been used by the indigenous people. For, my East Coast people, that's going to be Iroquois, Dakota, Cherokee, it's tons. There's so many different tribes. And then, you go West Coast, and then you have, like, Hopi and Hohokam, Apache, like, so many. Dude, that's all you gotta look up. It's like Apache uses, or, Hohokam, Hopi. They all have their specific uses that are a little different, and it's because their climates are just a little bit different. So I just think it's very interesting. You can douche with this. You can use it to kill fungal infections. You can use it to prevent that fun viral meningitis, or fungal meningitis that people keep screaming from the rooftops about. That's popping up all over the world and it's terrifying. We're all going to be Kanye West soon. We're either turning into me or we're turning into Kanye West or Donald Trump. These are the painkillers in your backyard. They're available to everybody in every state and area. Tobacco, like I said, I think it has over 100 different native species that grow just in the United States alone. And you find it a little bit more in warmer areas, obviously, but it's the stuff you can grow in your backyard. You can buy seeds on it online. It's cheap, and you can pick whatever stuff you want. You want to do fun cigars and make it all natural, and you want to use it to treat. Every time you get like sore throats, it's really good. If you have to clear your sinuses, oh my God, you can put it in a bowl and then burn it in a bowl, and then just breathe it in, and it'll pop your ears and stuff. But again, big warning. It's safe. Respect it. If you actually smoke it, it is a very powerful psychedelic, and it's a disassociative psychedelic. That's why you can speak to ancestors with it, and they used it in specific ceremonies. And the medicine men used it to spiritually interact with their world. It is similar to cough syrup, Benadryl. If you've ever been in high school and thought that was a great idea to take a bunch of those. Salvia, which again is a huge desert plant. And I'll get into that in a second. It makes your body feel awesome. It's a natural painkiller. It works on the nicotinoid, androgenetic, blah 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 receptors. Acetylcholine receptors. Adrenal acetylcholine. I think those are two different ones. But you can walk out and find this stuff. Just a little bit of knowledge. You look up what native species are in your area, and then just drive around. Like, I found most of this in my neighborhood. I found this 6 miles from my house. My kundalini, my best friend, the person I love the most in the world, cracks me up all the time. And like, I would not be on this planet without her. And she calls it, one day she was texting me because she started going through it after I did, and I was describing it to her. And she called it kundalingus. She didn't realize what it was called, and I will forever in my brain be like, yes, the kundalingus. Kundalingus analgesics. Let's talk. This is topical. This is antifungal. You can do these with teas. Tobacco, you generally don't want to eat it. It is a laxative if you do, and it can cause you to barf. It's an emetic. So, if you are feeling like you need to throw up or your tum-tum's hurting, a lot of this medication, if you think about historical uses, it kind of makes you feel real in pain first and then it goes away. When it comes to the barfy, poopy, that. Yearning for the poop tube. And then hallucinating the Titanic on the toilet. So yeah. Other common things you guys can use that are just really good for you. Oregano, thyme, and rosemary. Rosemary grows wild here, thyme and oregano grow wild here. There are varietals of it that grow everywhere because it's such a common plant that you can use to cook with. And thyme has really, really amazing specific chemicals in it that work with COVID, and so does oregano. It's broad spectrum. Like if you look up any of these plants and you just put like Latin name, so for desert willow, you would put in like Chalopsis is the family. I forget what the actual Linnaeus, Chalopsis linnaeus. So you put that in, and you just put phytochemical because again you gotta know the language. You gotta ask the right question to get the right answer because it's all obfuscated by white supremacy and science men, and they made it into a fancy language so you can't have it. You have no idea what it is. So Chalopsis, Linnaeus, phytochemical. And then you can put like, antiviral, and then it'll give you every study it's ever been done with, which there are a ton. And like I said, they're beautiful flowers. Like I hang my flowers up on the wall to dry here. You guys can see the other side of my lovely kitchen. Very small house. I have a 600 square foot apartment. So like for my very, very special tobacco, I have one plant drying up there that goes through like specific cycles with where my air vent is to keep it soft. It's very soft for specific soft purposes. But I keep my plants up there to dry, and then I have another drying rack over here, which is not near a vent, and it's just kind of, different temperature modulated too. Because I live in the desert, and they just have two big giant windows. I have 2 rooms in my apartment. 2 giant windows on one side, and then one on this side. So it's dumb. But anyway, so when we're talking the bark, for the desert willow, you can do a lot more with desert willow than the bark. So the tea is generally made from the leaves, right? So hang them up to dry just like you would with a rose. You can use them fresh. This keeps better. And then you can see the beautiful purple flowers there. That kind of look like oleander from someone that doesn't know what they're looking at. So make sure that you double check if you live in the Southwest and you use this, that you are not getting oleander. Because oleander is planted everywhere here as a fucking ornamental plant because it's drought tolerant. And it is one of the most poisonous plants in the world. And kids die from eating it, and we still continue to plant it. Because we got to take everything around you that's edible and, make it deadly, I guess. So you are scared to eat it? I don't know. It just seems so Occam's razor, I would hope. Ooh, that's my butane. For my other stuff, not my extractions. Excuse me. I don't know. It just seems wild to me. That so many things could happen together at the same time. They're so disadvantageous for everybody through this, like, mechanism of... I guess it's like worm.io. If the profit is always the piece and the point, then, I can see how that happens. Anyway, so let's get into what we're going to do today. Like any other good autistic person, you will see drinks start to pile up that I forget that I have. With all these jars that I forget to put away, so you get to come along for the ride. My brain is just chaos. It is a fun ride. All right. So I showed you guys the tobacco, Chalopsis, desert willow bark. Put this back for now. Now, let's talk extraction methods and what we're gonna do for my friend. So there's another creator on here who's been very kind to me and has given me a lot of wisdom. Her name is Amanita Dreamer. Go check her out. And she asked me to make an immune boosting kit for her out of what I could find in the desert. And something that's plentiful in the desert and is also plentiful in a lot of temperate areas is citrus. Everybody knows that eating oranges and vitamin C is good for your immune system. It really is. It's phenomenal. Vitamin C plays a very important role in how your cells work and stuff. So one thing for you guys that you should probably know is most of the food that you eat has really, really degraded with its nutritional value. By the time you get your fruit, it's been sitting in like air conditioned areas. It's not necessarily the freshest thing on the planet. And every day that it's been picked, it will sit, and the vitamins and nutrition content in it will waste. I think by the time you get it, I'm gonna talk out of my ass, but it's like 30% roughly, depending. It's bad. And if it's been through a pasteurization process, which every beverage in America has to go through, there's no nutritional content at all. So all those kombuchas that you buy, everything that's probiotic, everything that has like Gatorade and shit, that's supposed to be like good for you vitamin wise, is a lie. In fact, people have started to realize that and sue because of it. So pasteurizing everything over 120 Fahrenheit kills, pretty much everything that's beneficial from you. So all of your fun like naked shakes, everything that is manufactured has no nutritional content in it, and you wonder why we're all sick. Oh, it's so terrible. Like, I'm not even kidding. Go look it up. It's it'll keep you up at night once you realize the only thing that's really safe to eat is stuff you pick from your own backyard in your neighbor's fruit trees, or stuff that's frozen from the frozen aisle, because it comes directly from the farming plants into the frozen processing area. So if you're gonna buy from a grocery store, make sure it's frozen. And that's my tip for you. So immune kit too. What I have in my fridge, knowing what you have is really useful. So I have apples, and I don't have any pectin to make jam, but I wanted to make like a sweet syrup out of mesquite beans. Apples are really, really good for making pectins, jellies, jams. You just take the scraps, keep the peels, keep the cores, and then you just toss them in a pot and let them simmer very, very low. When you're cooking this stuff, like, unless you're doing high extraction on purpose, for like a terpene or like a specific chemical reason, keep it low. Like, I always do my oils on low. My soffit extractor, I usually go on low unless, again, I'm doing something specific. But I had my fridge cherries that were about to go bad because I have Rainier cherries that I picked up. I've never bought cherries before, but the Kundalingus was like, you have to eat fruit now, and these look delicious. And then they had the they had the self checkout, was the only place open, and this girl was working there. I say girl, she was a woman, older than me. And I asked her once I scanned them in because I didn't realize they were expensive. Like, what's the deal with the cherries? And she was the biggest hype man for these fucking cherries. She was just like, you have no idea. They're Rainier cherries. Like, they are the primo cherries. Every time they come out, I buy them. Like, you need to buy these cherries. So she went so hard, I had to get them. They're a treat. They're also really high in vitamin C. Like, again, berries, stone nut berries that come from rose plants are really good for you. So a lot of people don't know this, but most of the food you eat only comes from a couple families. And because it's been so I forget what they call it, like monocropped. There's a word for it, but they only grow like certain crops in certain areas. It makes it really susceptible to disease, because insects that like certain things get bigger in numbers, and then we use more pesticides, and there's an endless cycle of playing plague chicken with the locusts. So they I totally forgot where I was going. So you guys get to enjoy this. This is why I don't do longer content normally. So this is gonna be fun. Anyway, pectin, really good. Cherries, stone fruit, roses. That's what it was. Rose plants. So tons of stuff in your grocery store comes from rose plants. Like hibiscus is even a rose plant. But cherries. I want to say apples are roses. I want to say almonds are roses. Yeah. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm a little stoned. So lots of stuff comes from roses. Lots of citrus. You got a lot of mustard plants like broccoli, broccolini, cabbage, mustard greens, kale, Brussels sprouts are all technically like breaded subspecies, if that's what you want to call it, like cultivars, varietals, subspecies, whatever you want to fucking call it, from the same plant for broccoli. Really good for certain people that live in certain areas. Dark leafy greens are really high in vitamin K, but they also have a lot of oxalate in them. So like spinach, you're not supposed to eat a lot of spinach if you have shitty kidneys and don't react well to it, unless you like soak it out and process it the right way. You gotta be aware of your ancestry, your diet, like some of your issues and how you eat food. Like, we don't get any of that growing up. At least I did in the 90s. Like, we had a nutritional cooking class I took, and it was like shakes in a bag that reminded me of Jello, a banana, and yogurt was one of our projects, and then like a microwave cup cake thing. Yeah, so not a lot of education there for things that we needed to learn, like how to make medicine into basic adulting things. I got participation trophies from my boomer parents for everything, I guess. I don't know. So it's been a journey to relearn it. I had to get a college education to even vaguely understand how to do a lot of this. But let's get into basic extraction techniques and a little bit of identification for you. So when you guys are foraging, the biggest group you're going to find that's medicinally, like easily identifiable and medicinally valuable to you is going to be from the mint family. Mint family includes lavender, mint obviously. It includes salvias and sages. The big calling card for it is the stems are square stems. So when you cut them, you won't be able to see it here, but it's a very distinct, like 90-degree angle square. And they also have leaves that grow on opposing sides at 90-degree angles. So like one will be here, and then the next one will be here, and then the next one will be here. And they, again, are one of the sacred plants of a lot of indigenous tribes in the Americas. The Native Americans for the Southwest considered it a holy plant with tobacco. They also did it for sweetgrass and, I can't remember. I want to say ambergris, and it's not. It's one of the three things the wise man gave to Jesus. Myrrh. It's myrrh. Anyway, so it's so integral to our ecosystem out in the Southwest that we have a bunch of different types of it. And so I'll give you guys a little bit of a rundown for the ones I've managed to find and what you can do with them. So this is what you guys traditionally think of when you think of like sage sticks and smudging and the spiritual stuff and the culinary herb. This is Spanish silverleaf sage, or big silverleaf sage. It's got a fuzzy velvet coating on it, and then long pinnate silver leaves. Not pinnate, I forget what the word is. If you guys really want to get into this, and this is important to you from a plant taxonomy standpoint, get the book Botany in a Day. It's very small, it's very cheap. You can get it, I think, at a half-price bookstore probably, because it's one of the biggest books they recommend in college for plant taxonomy. And it will teach you how to identify these plants out in the wild very easily. I think the whole book has got to be like 90 pages. It's the most illuminating book written on the subject. Highly recommend it. But it'll teach you things like, legume plants usually have like two leaves, so they'll have branches, and it's like leaf, directly opposing each other. So they just get really easy to spot. They usually also have yellow flowers, like so do mustards. So that's desert sage, Spanish big silver sage. And then this funky little doodad is desert lavender. So you'll notice it is more stringy. I don't know what the word would be, like leggy, sad looking. It's a very sad, brutal looking plant. But again, it still has the square stem and the leaves grow in the same way. And these flowers are really easy to identify from a specific subgroup, but for you guys medicinally too, out in the wild, by their flowers. Their flowers come in those little rounded balls. So you have the sticks, and they have the leaves, and little rounded balls full of tons of flowers. They're usually purple, and they attract butterflies or birds. You can get them purple, you can get them white, you can get them pink. Oh, well, actually, you can get them in a lot of colors. Like pineapple sage has the long flowers for hummingbirds. So flower design, fun thing for you guys, flower design is specifically evolved around the pollinator it wants to attract, because plants compete for pollinators as a resource. So if you think of like the saguaro cactus with the big white flower, or you think of like butterfly bush that has all these tiny little white puff balls that look like pin cushions and like no technical petals. And it's for butterflies, because they land and it's round, they rub their bellies all over it, and they get full of pollen. And they go and they rub bellies on another plant, and they mate for the plant. And so they attract that. And if you can think of saguaro flowers, again, it's by bats and by moths. White is what bats are attracted to. It does it from their vision, too. Like bees are attracted to yellow flowers, and it's because yellow flowers aren't actually yellow as much as they are UV patterned. And bees can see in UV, so they see like a landing strip. So if you ever want to Google, UV patterns on flowers, it'll blow your mind. That's why some flowers look like prey for some animals, like mantis, flowers that look like mantis, to to be mated upon. Like a oh god. So some real fun shit goes on in the plant world. And when I talk about like the Kundalini significance about how gross and symbolic it gets, that's kind of the stuff I'm talking about. Like, it's just gross and violent, because that's what nature used to be before we started developing, like, the ability to be like, no, that's gross, and have, like, morals about it, right? Because what is the Little Dicky song? Like, if there were, like, 3 wolves outside, and you went outside, like, they would eat your face off, and your titties and shit, and your pussy, too, because they would. You know, like, has anybody seen I still haven't seen The Remnant. I'm kind of, Titanic is one of my favorite movies of all time, and James Cameron is James Cameron, because he's he's an amazing man, and it's just, it's ruined it. I don't know, this has ruined it. So this is another type of sage. This is blue indigo sage that grows wild in Arizona. It's got very distinct purple indigo flowers, and this has kind of dried a little bit, but these did have the little puff balls on it. And when I'm talking about like the real small flowers, that's what I mean. It's real tiny little puff balls of flowers. And all of these are great for like vestibular stuff, like the aromatic stuff I was talking about, where you can breathe it in and clear it. It's also a viral suppressant specifically for herpes, for like anti-inflammatory mast cell stuff. And then you can use it again topically for antifungal, antimicrobial, like a lot of the stuff that we should probably eat on a daily basis, if it's fresh and it works well, actually has a load of medical properties too. We just eat like shit. Like McDonald's doesn't have KFC's level of spice. I don't know if KFC's spice mix technically counts, but you think of like very, very old recipes for things, especially like I'm talking England and like when we think of like Roanoke, Virginia and the settlers, and then you even go back to like Pakistan and Afghanistan when it was like Persia and Sumeria and Babylonia. They've all been like a billion things, and I'm like thinking Prussia and Germany and the Balkans, like so much stuff. I don't know how I keep a lot of it straight. I don't think that I do. But lots of spiced meats. Think of Indian food. Heavily deep, rich, spicy meats with gravies, roasted, just like ground pastes of all of this, covering everything. Why? Because they didn't wash their hands back then, and in Europe they didn't know that cleaning the poop out of your crack and not walking around covered in shit all the time and pooping in your streets, it was bad for you, right? Like they would just dump buckets of, their way. Like I think there's a thing about the Palace of Versailles being so disgusting that like people didn't want to go there. Like they just pooped openly in the hallways, and it was just like full of human waste and cats and everything that comes with human waste. So yeah, lots and lots of weird hygiene stuff. It doesn't surprise me that they figured out about washing their hands first, I guess, once they got here, because pretty much every other culture has been really a lot of stuff that I know about with indigenous tribes. It depends on their area. Like if they're in really arid regions, they do the oil thing, and then if they're, in like more temperate regions, like if we think of like East Coast, mid-range, and then down, it's a lot more of daily bathing in rivers and streams. Like it's very to the area that you're in, but it generally there's an idea of cleanliness. Like the European idea of cleanliness was very unique to the world, which is why their disease vector was so insane when they went and they took over everything. That's why it killed off so many people, because they slept next to the livestock. They didn't take very good care of their hygiene. They didn't believe in washing their bodies as much as they believed in washing their clothes, because the Puritan idea of being clean was keeping your linens clean. So if you had white linens underneath your clothes, it meant you were clean of body and of spirit. So daily washing was not a thing, and neither was the hygiene around human waste. So different cultural norms. And so back to the pastes. You eat this and all the stuff that you make. And so my friend was asking for an immune booster. Let's start with the immune booster, right? So I'll go ahead. Let's do the immune booster.